Hey, Race, Gender, and Crime. You guys are getting ready to head in for the morning. It is 10 after 9. Hopefully you'll be here at 9:30. But I wanted to just go ahead and give you a little bit of a video that's going to help you with the quiz for Module 1. We have talked about race and how it's been used to label or categorize people. It was based on characteristics. Then we also went into, and we had a lot of interesting discussions on using genetics as a way to determine race, and we kind of debated and discussed whether or not we felt that that was appropriate or a slippery slope, and how it could be used and abused and whatever. So one of the things I want to let you know is one entity, one group that we have here in the United States is the ACLU. And the ACLU has looked at those concerns that we have. I am not saying that I agree with them. I am not saying that you have to agree with them. But the position that they have taken is that not anything that we really discussed about, but what I do need to mention is that they have taken the position that using your genetics in the way that we have discussed, they are not concerned with that providing false identification, meaning that you put your genetics into the system and that it comes back and says you did XYZ when you really didn't. So that is not one of the concerns, which I have heard other classes, and I have heard people on TV say that they're worried about being falsely accused of things that they didn't do. But as far as the ACLU is concerned, that is not an issue with them. So, kind of interesting. Gracie, if you want to fight with me on that one. Okay. We talked about the other day the Trail of Tears and how we were moving the indigenous people from their homeland for the purpose of us getting what we wanted. Hold on one second. This might be the college. Hello? Good, how are you? Absolutely, I'll be there. Thanks, you too. Okay, I lied. Wasn't the college. Okay, why it says Fort Pierce when it's really Stewart? I don't know. Okay, so we talked about how we started out in good faith, asking to borrow things, bartering, giving and taking. And it didn't take long for us to decide we were just going to take. So that also pertained to their land. And so we would ask and barter or buy or trade to get some of the land. Well, obviously, that land means a lot to them. I don't know if any of you have family land, farms, this, that, whatever, or even if it's just your home in the middle of the city, you're very protective. That's your home. That's your safe space. That belongs to you. So and predominantly we'll talk about the Cherokee or whatever, but we asked them for land, and when they told us no, we forced them off their land. And this is what begins the conflict, the war, whatever you want to call it, is the Trail of Tears. So who handled the matters of that and tried to keep the Native Americans, try and kind of have some oversight on what we were doing, what they were doing, giving us the go-ahead that we could do the things that we were doing. That's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, okay? So there was an entity that was supposed to be monitoring the situation, but you also have to look at that entity had its own agenda, okay? So, and the agenda was what's in our best interest, not necessarily the country's or the indigenous population or nature, okay? It was, we wanted what we wanted, and we figured out a way to get it. So one of the questions here says the blank enabled the U.S. government to grant lands west of the Mississippi. So realize there's a pretty big chunk of our country that is east of the Mississippi, okay? All your Midwest states, your eastern, your southern states, all of that, that is considered east of the Mississippi. And so what we did was when we asked them for their land east of the Mississippi so we could develop it, we offered them land west of the Mississippi. Now just think of how uncomfortable that would be. The climate's different, what the crops that you could grow is different, the animals that you're used to eating or providing for shelter or clothing or whatever is completely different. So not technically, I mean, is it a potentially a fair trade? Maybe, but if they're not equipped to deal with that situation, then it really isn't a fair trade. So what that act was called when we offered to move them or forced them to move from east to west of the Mississippi is the Indian Removal Act, okay? And so like I told you, this is race, gender, and crime. So we're going back to the very beginning, and I'm showing you how, let's just start with the indigenous population, and this is where our first bias, racism, and everything starts to occur, where we feel that we are better and more entitled to something that belonged to somebody else, okay? So that's why I say I don't like to discuss racism in purely a black and white issue, because it's not. It's basically, I want to say it's an American issue that we have taken over time, and when somebody ticked us off or didn't work in what we felt was our best interest, we made life difficult, okay? And I'm just going to leave it at that. We talked about, because I told you guys in class, how my friend is Blackanese, and this is where I like that you guys share with me, and I am able to ask questions of pretty much anybody, but because they realize I'm doing it out of respect and the genuine desire to learn. I'm not asking these, if somebody else were to overhear the conversation, they would judge me as being, you know, biased, racist, this, that, whatever. And that's truly not it. It's truly trying to understand other people's perspective so that I can grow and be better at doing what I do, but also so I want to be a better human being. I want to understand what people were put through so that I never contribute or downplay what they've been through, okay? So we did talk about, I told you I asked my friend Jack, because totally I am horrible at looking at people and labeling them. I don't like labeling anyway, but Jack has this very interesting, exotic type look to him. And so finally, I told you guys, I asked him, I said, Jack, I said, what is your heritage, your culture, your race, whatever you want to call it, what is it? And I did almost fall off my chair at the dining room table because we were having dinner, and Jack says, I'm Blackanese. And I'm like, what? And what it is that his parents met during World War II, when obviously we had a huge national issue with the Japanese, and we gathered up all of the American Japanese and put them into relocation centers. And that's how Jack's parents met, is in one of those relocation centers. Let's see. How many questions do we have in this quiz?
Am I extra early?
Oh, you're a little early. I'm recording a video for your class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, look at the...
Class.
We are going into race, gender, and crime, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so see, I double-checked the class. All right, I'm going to come back to you guys afterwards. And, yeah, class doesn't start for 12 more minutes. Yeah. So let's see if I can get one more or two more of these knocked out. We also talked about the Compromise of 1850, okay? And I want you to look at what that is, okay? We talked about it in class. But people, you guys are getting crazy in there. I'm trying to teach in my office, and you guys are in there scaring each other. So, the Compromise of 1850, which declared that freedom seekers were subject to laws of the state that they had fled from, okay, this is where we are giving slaves that have escaped, or we're not sure if they let them go, we're finding them in other states, and then what we're doing is gathering them up and either sending them back or using them for our own purpose. So the reason we were able to do that, again, probably came from the Indian Affairs, but the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but that's the Fugitive Slave Act. And so I did ask you, and your first discussion post was talking about how did law play a role in some of these, in the growth of race, okay? So this, again, you're way back at the beginning, okay? One of the legal statutes and arguments that you should be very familiar with would be Plessy v. Ferguson, and that's when the Supreme Court went ahead and legalized segregation, meaning black bathrooms, white bathrooms, black faucets, water fountains, white water fountains, where you were supposed to sit on the buses, what schools you could go to, and things like that. But the caveat that they threw in there was that it had to be separate but equal. That's something I want to talk about in class today, because is it possible to be separate and equal if you are saying that one entity should not mix with the other? Are you not going to gravitate naturally to giving your own race, culture, an advantage, subconsciously or consciously? I would have to say that most of those would probably have been conscious decisions because of all the riots and things that broke out. But simply everybody wants the best for themselves and their own family, friends, whatever. We do go into, after we do this separate but equal, that the universities like Harvard, Yale, did have quotas on the type of students that they would allow in the school system. And this is where we see not a black and white issue, not an indigenous persons issue. This is where we see a Jewish issue. And they limited the amount of Jewish individuals who were allowed into these particular universities, okay? And that was a legal thing and an issue that we had as well. So notice how we're progressing into different cultures, different races, and the rules are changing, okay? First we were talking about taking your land, then we want us to be separated so that we're not intermixing, and now I'm saying you're not entitled to the same education, only a certain amount of you can have what I have, okay? So again, we're progressing both in thought and in what we are doing legally. This is going to jump way forward, but again, we're talking about the laws and how it's affected race over time. And so hate crimes, okay? I haven't read your work yet to see if any of you have mentioned hate crimes, but most definitely it would be one of the most recent things. And hate crimes are usually, you see a man and a woman together, and one's white, one's black. Mr. Dewey, you can ask Mr. Dewey. He will discuss that with you in one of his classes. I think it's ethics, and but he will talk about how he personally knows people in 2020, 21, 22, that he's very close to them, and they have to deal with the wife is white, the husband is black, and still to this day, we are treating them differently. Looking at them, things are being said, it's a very uncomfortable situation. So, and then it puts the family in an uncomfortable position. So not only do we look at interracial, but we also, victim and offenders, we look at them, are they the same race? And we do predominantly commit crime against our own, okay? Part of that is due to the fact that that's who you're spending most of your time with, but also you understand how to do, what to get, what they have, if it's something of similarity to you. So white on white crime, black on black crime, things like that. But the crimes aren't always the same. So it's not like murder is the same for one as it is for the other, or rape, or, perfect example, serial killers. Do we have black serial killers and female serial killers? Yes. But are they predominantly, to the best of our knowledge, white, middle-aged men? Yes. Okay. Who collects all the data that we get on these crimes and these laws and stuff like that? And when did that actually start happening? Well, we have the UCR, which you know is the Uniform Crime Report, and that is something that is voluntarily done. You are not required to do it. However, if the agency doesn't do it, the agency doesn't receive federal funding, because that is a program that is housed and run by the FBI, and it goes all the way back to 1930. So it's something that's been going on for a long time, but it's been evolving and changing and becoming much more specific, and we are giving agencies incentives to participate, because the more we have, the more we learn, the more we know, the better we can do our job, okay? Oh, my girlfriend gets mad every time I mention this one. In relation to early immigrant discrimination in the U.S., NINA, N-I-N-A, stood for what? Okay, so let's go through history here and who we hated, all right? We've got indigenous people, we have talked about Jewish people, we have talked about black individuals. So now let's pick on the Irish, okay? The Irish came over here because of the potato famine. We blamed them for, what did they contribute to the U.S.? Alcohol and fighting. So that is how we saw it. And so therefore we did not treat them equally. So NINA actually stands for No Irish Need Apply. You couldn't get away with that today. You can't discriminate. And that was very blatant and something that you would see all over the place, especially up in the Northeast. Let's see. If you watch the presentation, you're going to know that what is not limited to arrest and victimization data, and that's crime that happens after hours or is difficult to track. I like to call this the black horse of crime. It's things that people don't report for a multitude of reasons. They're either embarrassed, they don't get it, they don't want people to know, or it's very late at night and they don't want to call. They don't want to bother somebody, they don't want to interrupt somebody, or maybe they've had an experience in the past that we don't respond as well late in the evening. Chinese Exclusion Act was in 1882. It was limited to the immigration of Chinese laborers in the 1940s. So realize 1882, and we really didn't start implementing and getting into it until the 1940s. Okay, so you're talking 60 years later. But that was, we limited how many of the Chinese were allowed to come over for the fact of working. Okay, and what they predominantly did was work on the railroads to get us from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then we didn't want to do those jobs. We were too good for those jobs. But when we started having issues and losing the jobs that we had, we wanted those back. So we imposed laws on the Chinese. Wickersham Deportation Report is a report that noted that Mexicans were treated with considerable prejudice by the U.S. So there was a study that was done by Wickersham, it was Wickersham deportation, and that just simply was looking at how we treated Mexicans. Now look, we've now added a whole nother population, okay? So this is where I say, it's not a black and white issue, it's maybe an American issue against everybody that we felt was in our way, okay? Give you a couple more of these here. What type of hate crime has the highest incident number? According to the FBI, this one's really simple, intimidation, okay? You simply bully this, that, whatever. Do we also murder in extreme cases? Do we beat them up? Yes, more than we murder. And do we vandalize, like writing things on their houses, their cars? Yes. But predominantly more people do it and more people get away with it when you're just intimidating, bullying, making life difficult. So there's only a couple of questions left that we're going to help you with that quiz. So I'm going to leave those to your own. You can look at the module quiz, but we're going to go talk about it right now because class starts in 1 minute. All right, guys, see you in a sec. I can find how to turn you off.